Okay, I'm continuing on with this handout, chi-square hypotheses. I'm now going to refer to example number 2. Example number 2 of hypotheses requiring chi-square to test. H sub 1, the research hypothesis. Class in school is related to or dependent on participation in extracurricular clubs. Class in school is related to or dependent on participation in extracurricular clubs. But before moving on to the null hypothesis, let's take a closer look at the two variables that are mentioned in this hypothesis. Class in school measured as freshman, sophomore, junior, senior. So unlike the first example, there are 4 categories in one of our variables, is related to or dependent on participation in extracurricular clubs, measured as yes or no. Yes, there is some participation, or no, there is no participation. So we have 2 categorical variables, class and school, which has 4 categories, and then we have another variable, participation in extracurricular clubs, which has 2 categories. Let's look at the null hypothesis, H sub 0, the hypothesis of no relationship, the hypothesis of independence. H sub 0. Class in school is not related to or is independent of participation in extracurricular clubs. Class in school, measured as freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, is not related to participation, measured as yes or no. So 2 variables, they're both categorical, except in this case, one variable has 4 categories, class and school, and the other variable has 2 categories like before. Moving on to example number 3, the second page of the hypothesis handout. Example number 3 of hypotheses requiring chi-square to test. H sub 1, the research hypothesis or alternative hypothesis. City is related to or dependent on level of employment. So let's take a closer look at that hypothesis. City measured as, let's count them, KC-Mo, KCK, Independence, Wichita, Lincoln, 5 categories, is related to or dependent on level of employment measured as below the national average, at the national average, or above the national average. 3 categories. So here again, we have a hypothesis that deals with 2 categorical level variables, except now we have 1 categorical variable that we're calling city that has 5 categories, KC-Mo, KCK, Independence, Wichita, Lincoln. And then the other variable in the analysis has 3 categories, whether or not that city, whether or not each of those cities is, their unemployment rate, is below the national average, at the national average, or above the national average. Now, it might seem kind of strange. I'm using the word average, and I just, in an earlier clip, I said chi-square has nothing to do with means, standard deviations, variances, nothing like that. But we're not really dealing with the means. Rather, we are, or in this case, the average. Rather, we are categorizing that city, those cities, into whether or not they fall into one of 3 categories. Whether or not their unemployment rate is below the national average, at the national average, above the national average. So 3 categories for that other variable. The null hypothesis, H sub 0, the hypothesis of no relationship, or the hypothesis of independence, states the same thing except for the word not and the word independent. City, measured as KC-Mo, KCK, Independence, Wichita, Lincoln, is not related to or is independent of level of unemployment, measured categorically, below the national average, at the national average, above the national average. Example number 4. H sub 1, the research hypothesis or alternative hypothesis. Academic discipline, measured as social sciences, earth sciences, or humanities, is related to or dependent on computer use, measured as Mac, PC, or none. So here again, we have two categorical variables, except in this case, each of the categorical variables has three categories. Academic discipline, measured as social sciences, category 1, earth sciences, category 2, humanities, category 3, is related to or dependent on preferred type of computer. Mac, category 1, PC, category 2, none, category 3. The null hypothesis, the hypothesis of no relationship / independence, is very similar, again, except for the words not and independence. Academic discipline, measured as social sciences, earth sciences, humanities, is not related to, is independent of. There's no relationship between those two things, is what this hypothesis is saying. Academic discipline, measured as social sciences, earth sciences, humanities, is not related to or is independent of preferred computer use, Mac, PC, none. Finally, at the bottom of that second page, just a reminder, although perhaps it's a reminder you don't need because we've been doing this all along with all the inferential statistics that we've been working with. Just like other inferential statistics, when you are asked to conduct a test of the null hypothesis, it is the null hypothesis that you will refer to directly. It is the null hypothesis that you will definitively state rejection or retention. Before moving on, let's take a moment and talk about what this means when we are rejecting or retaining the null hypothesis. Let's just use the last example, example number 4. Academic discipline is not related to, is independent of computer use. If we keep or retain that null hypothesis, we are agreeing with it. We are saying, indeed, academic discipline is not related to computer use. If we are rejecting, getting rid of that hypothesis, we are saying that those two things might be related to one another. We are rejecting or doing away with the null hypothesis of no relationship. We are rejecting or doing away with the null hypothesis of independence. So I hope that's fairly clear. Next, we are going to move on to just introducing you to a new symbol and talking about what the statistic itself means.